We're back on KID News Radio 590 AM and 92.1 FM. Joining us is Bill Moran with a group called Stoptuitionhikes. Stoptuitionhikes.com is their website. Bill, welcome. Good to have you with us.
It's great to be here.
Now, you've launched a petition drive to put a measure on the ballot raising the cigarette tax $1.25 a pack and then using that revenue to send more kids to college. Give us a few details about your plan, Bill.
Sure. So the ballot initiative does a few things. It's actually $1.50 per pack. It also has a 12% increase on other tobacco products. And the funds go towards reducing tuition at the universities by 22%. It also adds $7 million to the community college system. The community colleges are a great connection to rural Idaho. We're a very spread out geographic state, so it helps out those institutions. And then it provides another $7 million towards the state's tobacco cessation program. It's expected to save the state $400 million in long-term expenses, healthcare costs. So there's a huge savings component to it. It would also save 6,500 lives due to the tobacco cessation impact.
How much, and I know that this is an initiative, I mean, you're circulating petitions, but the mood of the legislature probably matters to some degree. Do you think lawmakers would be generally supportive of this idea?
That's an interesting question. I would say not this time of the year because they're about to enter primary season.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of highlights why something like this would have to go a ballot initiative route. We see in Idaho, so Idaho Politics Weekly did a poll recently, found 65% support for this initiative. And it was across party lines. In fact, 65% of Republicans supported this. So this isn't something that's not in the interest of Idaho voters or something that Idaho voters don't want. It's something that's really tricky for politicians to get involved in, especially in a primary. If this were in the legislature, for instance, a legislator thinks it's a good idea. Well, if they go for it, then suddenly their primary opponent is very well funded. So there's some practical implications that the legislature faces that we as the people, we can take the matter into our own hands.
Are you worried that the legislature, and of course it the initiative, if it's passed, would send the amount of money you talk about, somewhere in the neighborhood of $7 million, that the legislature might just take $7 million from the education fund and reallocate it somewhere else so there wouldn't be a net gain there? I mean, is that a concern?
It's actually not a concern in this instance, and the reason being, for one, if you look at where the funding goes and the way that it's separated out, so the 22% tuition reduction, that goes to students. That doesn't go directly to the institutions. That goes directly to students' tuition bills. So here's this quantifiable benefit that students and families receive. It's actually much more than you'd realize because on average, students will save $8,000 in principal over the term of their years of study and graduating, but they'll also save about $15,000 more per student in interest. They actually save almost double the amount in interest. It's money that's not going out of the state.
All right. Now,
additionally, the $7 million that goes towards community colleges, those are going into rural communities. So the legislature doesn't really have an interest in pulling those funds. Tobacco cessation programs, similarly, they actually help our state save a lot of money. The average pack of cigarettes costs the state of Idaho $15 in healthcare costs.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're able to accomplish, which we would expect, a 20% reduction in smoking rates by pushing this, well, then that saves the state so much more money. There's no reason to really carve this up. Will you see something around the edges? Possibly.
Bill, your website and your group is called Stop Tuition Hikes, but and while this would give money to kids to go to college and people to go to college, would it actually do anything to keep tuition hikes down?
Well, this is the only ballot initiative in the entire nation that actually actively reduces tuition. And I would say it actually does reduce the risk of future tuition hikes as well. Um, what we've seen in our state is heavy defunding of higher education. Um, since since 2009, our state actually provides about 25% less in overall state funding to higher education, but our universities serve about 18% more students.
Yeah.
And so we look at ourselves and we wonder, why has tuition gone up? It's because we don't fund the universities anymore.
Yeah.
In fact, the tuition increases match one-to-one with the level of defunding. But we look at that. When the universities raise their tuition, we get upset at the universities. We don't get upset at the state legislature because funding for higher education got cut. We get upset at the universities,
Yeah.
which has this interesting dynamic of putting them back on the chopping block next time and creating this downward spiral that causes tuition to go up
Yeah.
year after year after year. And so now we have the dynamic in our state where tuition has tripled since 2000. Nothing tripled since 2000 except for tuition.
Bill, I want to ask you one last question here because it's kind of a devil's advocate question, and a lot of times we look at tobacco taxes when we want to raise revenue because it's probably one of the easiest taxes to raise. But there are some who say that smoking rates are higher among the poor. So is this an inadvertent tax on the poor if you target tobacco?
It's not, and that question would be a lot more difficult to answer if Idaho had already raised their cigarette tax in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So in Idaho, we have the region's lowest cigarette cost, about $4.78 a pack. If you're not a picky smoker, you can buy them for $4 a pack. And so, as a result, the smoking rate is so much higher than it should be. And so we've seen this in a couple states. Arizona and Utah have pushed similar efforts where if you raise the cigarette tax from a really low starting point, bring it back up to basically a regional norm, and you push tobacco cessation funding at the same time, you get about a 20% reduction in smoking. Now, if you think about that 20% reduction, there's savings there. There's savings on the packs of cigarettes that aren't purchased. There's savings on the health factors. There's savings on health insurance that you pay. And we see, in fact, that 12,000 kids would never start smoking. That's a big deal. That's 12,000 kids that don't fall into a systematic poverty trap.
Yeah.
10,000 adult smokers would stop smoking. 6,500 lives would be saved. These are presumably poor people. And I can tell you from my own experience, I came from a relatively low-income background. Both of my parents smoke. My mother is dying right now of terminal pulmonary fibrosis. If you're looking for a way to help the poor, $4 cigarettes is not the way to do it.
Yeah. All right. Our guest this morning, Bill Moran, their website, Stoptuitionhikes.com. They've just launched a petition drive. Bill, I wish you luck, and certainly this is an issue we'll be watching. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.